is that? Phat Beet is a plant whose name has consistently been stepped on this channel. That's mainly due to the reason that it kind of just underperforms. But that was at level 1, so I thought, what if it's max level? Would it still underperform? Or would it single-handedly vanquish all the zombies within PvZ2 to replenish its dignity? Well, let's find out. But before we begin, let me quickly go over the rules for you. Only Phat Beet, skip all levels that force the use of another plant, pre-placed plants are fine, and lastly, coins earned throughout the challenge can be used to buy plant food, but no replaying levels to farm coins. Oh, and about 7.1% of people who watch my videos are actually subscribed, so if you end up enjoying the video, consider subscribing. It's free and you can always unsubscribe, okay? Let's begin. And for Phat Beets, ancient Egypt was easy enough that it isn't really worth mentioning all the small details. So here's all the levels at once. And while they play out, I can quickly go over the stats of the max level Phat Beet. Its sun cost goes from 150 to 75. Its recharge goes from 5 seconds to 3 seconds. It has 900 health. Also, with the mastery comes a 1 in 5 chance to boost every time I place it down. For last, I saved its damage, because if you're unfamiliar with Phat Beet, it has two different types of attacks. One is just its normal attack, which at max level does 45 damage, but then from every 4th to 6th hit, it does a bigger attack, which at max level does 135 damage. And I'll point this out in Pirate Seas just so you get a better picture of what I mean. And with that, all the levels of ancient Egypt were very easily beat. Next up, and here we are, day 1 of the Pirate Seas. And this is the perfect level to kind of tell you about the strategy that I chose to use with the Phat Beets. Very similarly to the lightning reed, you want to be using the top middle lane and bottom middle lane because of its area attack. And you can see the Phat Beets in the back are 2 columns away from the ones in the front. That's because these 4 Phat Beets are now able to cover most of the map. And if by some chance a zombie gets to the very back, we can very easily place another Phat Beet to take care of it. And that was day 1 of Pirate Seas. Day 2 starts, nothing really special, just missing half of one lane, and I chose to go with the quad placement of the Phat Beets. Normally when I'm doing these challenges, I like to look through the PvZ wiki just so I can keep my statements as factual as possible, and I learned that Pirate Seas takes place in the year 1679. Pretty cool. But aside from that, day 2 was also very easily beat. And day 3 again is one flag with us missing half a lane in the middle lane, and I quickly got down 2 Phat Beet in the top middle lane and bottom middle lane, later adding 2 behind. And again, with the strongest zombies being the swinging pirates and the coneheads, the final wave was no threat. Day 4 ramps up a little bit by adding a second flag, but I chose to just stick with my normal placements. And you can kind of start to see where the Phat Beet starts to fall off in the top middle lane with the bucket head, because even though the Phat Beet is max level, the zombies start getting some hits off. And with 2 back-to-back bucket heads, that Phat Beet actually got eaten. But of course, I quickly replaced it, and that one actually insta-plant fooded, knocking out all the zombies next to it. Lastly, that zombie in that bottom lane, finishing day 4. Day 5 sticks with 2 flags, but this time 3 of the lanes are missing half of their tiles, and one of them happens to be that top middle lane, throwing my strategy off just a little bit. And these are the placements I chose to go with at first, but then I planted another Phat Beet in that bottom middle lane because it's throwing my OCD off a little bit. Now within the final wave, there's a lot of seagull zombies, so I chose to plant food my Phat Beet, which instantly took out basically every zombie, beating day 5. Day 6 also had 2 flags, and again the same lanes with the same tiles were missing, so of course all my placements ended up being the exact same as well. And the final wave sent in a lot of swinging pirates, but they were all easily taken down. And now with only a couple of bucket heads and a conehead remaining, day 6 was beat without any casualties. Day 7, once more, it was only 2 flags, and this time only 2 of the lanes had tiles missing, and thankfully it was the top lane and the bottom lane, which allowed me to go back to my previous strategy for the placements. But there was a little problem within this level. That was the introduction of the barrel roller zombie that immediately took out that top lane Phat Beet. So I placed another Phat Beet right underneath to take it out, but then I realized there's another one in that middle lane, but somehow 2 Phat Beets were able to take it out. And so the easiest fix to the strategy of the Phat Beet placement to take out the barrel roller was just adding a Phat Beet in that middle lane. That meant that any barrel roller that would come in would have 2 Phat Beets dealing damage to it, ensuring our victory over them and day 7. But then although day 9 did have 2 flags, it went back to limiting our tile space. So honestly, honestly, this wasn't too bad because we could place the Phat Beets in the back to take care of any swinging zombies or any other zombies that would happen to make it there. And we could just plant 2 Phat Beets in those front lanes that can take care of basically any zombie, including the bear rulers, because there's at least 2 of them. And so although we're limited by tile space, we still only had to plant 4 Phat Beets to take care of all the zombies. In the end, beating day 9 very easily. Day 10 was another step up in the Pirate Seas, with the level now having 3 flags. And honestly, even though the tiles were limited, I could have just gone with the strategy from the previous level, but for some reason I chose to go with the strategy from the earlier levels with the double Phat Beet placement in the back. And this level actually introduced imp cannons as well, but the cool thing about the Phat Beets was they're able to damage them because of their area damage. And even the imp cannons that seemed impossible to reach, like that one in the bottom lane, were reachable because we could just plant food or Phat Beet. And this helped us quickly beat day 10. Now we're on day 11, again with 2 flags and 3 lanes limiting our space. And I'd mentioned earlier that I'd show you what the bigger attack of the Phat Beet looks like. So if you just focus on that top Phat Beet, as soon as the swinging pirates land, it does it. And if you look at it again, you'll see that this is its normal attack. It's a pretty cool feature, and I'm not gonna lie, even though I've played this game a lot, I did not know that existed before doing this challenge. There was an annoyance within this level, and that was that top lane imp cannon, because I'd plant fooded this Phat Beet, but it didn't reach. And then if you look in the front of that bottom middle lane, I planted another Phat Beet and plant fooded it to try and reach it, but it only ended up reaching that first imp cannon and not that top one. Meaning for this level, an imp cannon was unreachable and we just have to wait it out. And then after about 25 seconds, it exploded and we easily took out all the imps, beating day 11. Day 14 is the first prepper defenses level, not including ancient Egypts of course, so I prepped some defenses. And I added a few more than my normal placements just because I could. And even though the final wave sent in a lot of zombies, the Phat Beet's area damage was easily able to take them all out. Day 15, I first quickly shoveled this 3-peater, and in one of the previous videos, about 10 people made the same joke about 3-peaters having 3 Peters, and I thought that I should mention that so you guys can really enter my mind state. But aside from that, this level consisted of a lane of flowers that we had to protect from being trampled on in the very back, and also 2 flags. And normally, I'd plant a column of Phat Beet right in front of the flowers, but this time I didn't really see the need. And with the final wave being heavily underwhelming, my instincts were right, and after plant fooding this middle Phat Beet, we easily beat day 15. Day 16 is probably the first semi-challenging challenge where we have to protect these 2 spring beans in the middle lanes. And take the phrase semi-challenging very lightly because this wasn't very challenging at all. With a couple of extra Phat Beet placement in those top 2 lanes, we're easily able to beat all the bear rollers and day 16. Day 17 only has 2 flags, but a certain challenge where you have to beat a specific amount of zombies in a certain amount of time. So I placed extra Phat Beet in those top 2 lanes just for the extra damage. And with that, we're easily able to meet the challenge requirements. The final wave sent in a couple of the swinging zombies and flyers alongside some imp cannons, but they were all easily taken care of. There was an imp in the bottom lane who I had to plant an extra Phat Beet for, but as that was the last zombie, day 17 was easily defeated. Day 22 is a fun level, but first we have to prep some defenses. And I really wanted to see if the quad placement Phat Beet strategy was able to beat this entire day. The first cannons only sent a few imps, so they're obviously easily beaten. About halfway in, the numbers ramped up a little bit, but still, the Phat Beets proceeded. And then there's this one massive imp launch that was kind of scary for that top middle lane Phat Beet, but somehow it made it through. And then again, another massive imp launch, but all the imps were easily beaten. I was thinking they must be low health, but somehow the Phat Beets kept on overcoming all of the imps thrown at them. But then tragedy struck as a massive imp launch soared through the skies and the bottom middle lane front Phat Beet was eaten, and I had to quickly replant it. And then the final big launch was sent in with the very satisfying defeat of all the imps, beating day 22. In day 23, we had to protect flowers from being trampled on and also defeat a certain amount of zombies in a certain amount of times. And it only had 1 flag. And this time my strategy was to first cover all the flowers with Phat Beet, because this time the flowers were a little more upfront than last time. But after the flowers were well protected, I planted another column of Phat Beets very far forward. And this was in hopes of speeding the level up, as well as trying to meet the requirements for beating the zombies in a certain amount of time, which of course we did. And the final wave also didn't send anything too difficult, so we easily beat it, conquering day 23. And here we were, the final day of the Pirate Seas, where we have to protect these 2 spring beans in the top and bottom lane. And to protect them this time, I planted a Phat Beet right next to them, and then right after a Phat Phat Beet right behind both of them to give them double protection. But then I realized I could add another layer because the Phat Beet has that area damage, so I can place one across the spring bean, which also protects it. And with the very mediocre final wave, Pirate Seas was very easily defeated. Next up, Day 1 of Wild West already has minecarts in it, which of course we basically never make use of, but there was a special thing of my own that I decided to do in the Wild West, and that was the 2 Phat Beet challenge. My goal was to figure out how far could I get into the Wild West by only using 2 Phat Beet. And as you can see, Day 1 was very successful, but Day 2 quickly showed us where these Phat Beet might start to falter, and that was that bucket head in that top middle lane, which of course, as we mentioned previously, always gets hits off if it's only 1 Phat Beet going against it, and 2 bucket heads are able to completely take out 1 Phat Beet. But of course we have the power of plant food on our side, helping us beat Day 2. Day 3 quickly introduced the piano zombie, but thankfully it was in the very middle lane, so both of the Phat Beet were able to instantly take it out. But then within the final wave, another piano zombie was sent, but again it was only in the middle lane, and a plant food from my Phat Beet was able to take it out alongside most of the other zombies, beating Day 3. Day 5 was the first level with 2 flags and a zombie in the middle lane that could also be very detrimental, like the bucket head if sent in big quantities. And as the first big wave was sent in, I kind of panicked a little bit and plant fooded the top Phat Beet, which instantly took care of all the problems. Another good thing about the Phat Beet was they're able to take out the dynamite zombies before they leap over to the back. But even if they did leap over, the Phat Beet has area damage which attacks behind it, so they wouldn't really be that big of a problem. And now is the final wave, and somehow no tanky zombies were sent directly in front of the Phat Beet. So in a very simple manner, we took out all the zombies, beating Day 5. Day 6, defenses were prepped, or I should have said minimal defenses were prepped, because of course we're still doing the 2 plant challenge. And these levels always quickly send in a lot of zombies at once, so of course I had to plant food that top Phat Beet to take care of them. And then a little bit later, I also had to plant food this bottom lane Phat Beet, which destroyed all the zombies that were coming towards it. And then came in the final wave. And this could have been bad if both of the Phat Beet had a tanky zombie right in front of them, but thankfully it was only that top Phat Beet that did, so I had to plant food that one, but the bottom one was easily able to handle itself, in the end conquering Day 6. Day 7 was also very simple, but then it was Day 10, the day that introduces the chicken wranglers, and the chicken wrangler up top got hit, but then a chicken leaked through the Phat Beet, making it all the way to the lawnmower. And honestly, at first I'd expected the Phat Beet's area damage to be able to take care of all the chickens without a problem, but seeing what had just happened, I knew this was going to be a big problem. And as a chicken wrangler was sent in the top middle lane, a chicken again made it through, and I was about to lose, but I decided it was time to let go of this challenge because there's no way I was getting through these chickens. Because if you look in the bottom lane, even with plant fooding, the plant food animation takes time, which allows the chickens to run past the Phat Beets, in a way making the plant food kind of useless against the chickens. So in the end, I decided that Day 10 was as far as 2 max level Phat Beet could make it. And now we're on Day 11, where there wasn't a restriction of 2 max level Phat Beet, but there was a restriction of only 500 sun. But of course, that's much more lenient. So I made use of the sun, planting 4 Phat Beet in total, easily beating Day 11. Day 13, I used the same exact placements, and you might be wondering why these placements are a little bit different from the Pirate Seas ones, since the Pirate Seas ones covered much more ground. And the main reason is that the Wild West doesn't have swing zombies like the Pirate Seas did, so there's not much reason to protect the back of the lawn, and much more reason to protect the front from things like bulls, and of course any other tanky zombies like the bucket heads or the pianos. And the final wave sent in a decent amount of tanky zombies, but nothing too much, allowing us to easily conquer Day 13. Day 14, I was expecting it to be an interesting one because there's another level that includes the chicken wranglers, but with these 2 extra Phat Beet, all the chickens are very easily dealt with, allowing us to beat Day 14 without losing a single lawnmower. Day 15, we're only allowed to lose 2 plants, and we beat it without losing a single one. Day 16, we have to protect this 1 walnut on this minecart, and I do so by planting 2 Phat Beets, 1 in front and 1 behind it, and these were easily able to take us through the entire level. Day 17, we have to protect flowers from being trampled on, and my first move was planting a Phat Beet right in front of all the flowers just for some extra protection. Later, planting 2 more Phat Beet very up front for the main source of damage, and then even 2 more Phat Beet for even more damage, allowing us to beat Day 17. Day 18, defenses were prepped. and I decided to be a little devious by planting 6 Phat Beet instead of the normal 4. But then I quickly realized that this was a good decision because there was a crazy amount of chickens being sent, and my front 2 Phat Beet were very easily eaten by all the chickens. But then of course I got scared, so I quickly replaced them, thankfully beating day 18. 19 was a little scary as well because we could only lose 2 plants, so I decided to go with this formation of Phat Beet to maximize my chances of winning, which of course we did without losing a single Phat Beet. Day 21 we had to protect more flowers from being trampled on, and with our normal methods we did so very easily. Day 23 is probably the scariest of these challenges because we have to protect these flowers from being trampled on, and also we can't lose more than 2 Phat Beet. And what makes this truly scary is that this level sends in chicken wranglers, and to counter this I placed more Phat Beet than I think I have throughout this entire challenge so far, which allowed us to beat this devious level on our very first try. Day 24 is the final level we play of the Wild West, and normally it's difficult depending on the plant we have, but thankfully Phat Beet pairs up pretty well with these walnuts, so we're actually able to beat this level very easily. And that was all the Wild West with only max level Phat Beet. Next step, Frostbite Caves, although it has an annoying gimmick of freezing plants, in theory shouldn't really be a problem for Phat Beets because they have that area attack damage, so anytime a plant gets frozen, another one should be able to unfreeze it. But that's just in theory, so let's see if it truly works out like that. Day 2 has 1 flag, 3 frozen walnuts, and 3 frozen repeaters, and we choose to just go with the basic placement of 2 Phat Beets in the very front in the top and bottom middle lanes. For now, there isn't really much need of Phat Beets in the back because there isn't really a zombie that can get there, but later on there will be the snowstorm zombies like the ones in ancient Egypt that come in with the sandstorms, and that's when we'll need to start placing Phat Beet in the back as well. But besides that, day 2 was easily beat. Day 4 quickly already brought in 2 flags and some pretty weird redirection pads in the bottom 2 lanes, and I wasn't really sure when the snowstorm zombies start coming in, so I actually already started placing Phat Beet in the back. But this level was especially annoying because it started introducing the snowball throwers, and to semi-counter them I had to place a Phat Beet in the middle of my 4 that already existed just in case any got frozen. And this was very much needed because these snowball throwers in the final wave started getting really annoying. But as there was only 2 of them, we beat them pretty easily. Day 6 again had 2 flags and 2 frozen sunflowers, but they definitely upped the freezing aspects of this level as my Phat Beet kept on getting frozen. And to counter this, I had to keep placing a Phat Beet in the middle lane behind the others just so it'd keep breaking the ice. In the end, having to place a lot more Phat Beet than I first expected. But day 6 was still beat. Day 7 had these frozen imps and frozen split peas who were kind of in annoying positions, so I decided to break them and shovel them as soon as I could, and then replace where the split peas were with more Phat Beet. And I think these snowball throwers are definitely the worst zombie of this world for Phat Beet because it has some pretty limited range. But by spamming a couple more Phat Beet, day 7 was also made pretty simple. Day 9 was another difficulty shift as I added a 3rd flag, and I guess dodos as well, but they aren't very much of a problem. The first 2 big waves were pretty easily beaten, and the final wave was also just showing off the dodos, so it wasn't difficult either, allowing us to beat day 9. Day 11 is always a surprising difficulty shift as it quickly adds the 4th flag, and judging by the redirection tiles, this level should theoretically be able to be beat just in that bottom lane, but the game very quickly psychs you out by sending dodos in the top 2 lanes, showing you that it's not going to be possible just in that bottom lane. This level was also pretty heavy in windstorms, consistently freezing my Phat Beet, and it pretty heavily spammed zombies, but thankfully the Phat Beet has very good area damage, so the spamming of the zombies isn't much of a problem at all, allowing us to beat day 11. Day 12, I prepped defenses in a very odd manner, and I chose to go with these placements because I wanted a defense that could fend for itself, but at the same time I didn't want to overplace because I didn't want all my plants to get frozen and then I didn't have any sun left. And you can see that I had to add another Phat Beet in that 2nd column in the middle lane just to fight off the ice. But other than that, day 12 was pretty easily beat as well. Day 13 had 4 flags and also a column of flowers in the very back that we had to defend. And this time I didn't really bother placing Phat Beet right in front of the flowers because they were in the very back, and instead just went with the star pattern in the front. But this is a level I'm very familiar with because in the beginning it just seems like a simple defend the flower level, but then out of nowhere the final wave always introduces a gargantuar in that bottom lane. But of course I knew this, so I quickly planted a Phat Beet to counter the imps that were going to be thrown, and the gargantuar was beheaded and day 13 was beat. Day 15 we have to protect these 2 pepper poults in the top and bottom lane, and pepper poult's another plant we make a lot of fun of on the channel, so I might have to try this challenge with it as well to see if it's as really as bad as I think think it is. But aside from that, day 15 was beat. Day 17 wasn't too difficult either. Day 19 had some pretty annoying snowstorms, but was also conquered. Day 20 ended up having this insane line of frozen imps in the bottom lane because of the caveman pusher zombies. But then I plant fooded this Phat Beet that was right next to them to get rid of most of the ice. And then slowly but surely, all of the imps were beaten. Barely beating day 20 without the need of a lawnmower. Day 22 has these frozen guacodiles who we instantly shovel. But then the weasel zombies are also introduced. But of course, 2 lines of 3 Phat Beet each were more than enough to beat them. Day 23, we have to protect these charred guards. So we place a column of Phat Beet right in front of them. And then also some Phat Beet in the front for the main damage, allowing us to pretty simply beat day 23. Day 26 actually got pretty scary at first because a couple of the weasels slipped through, taking out the top 2 lawnmowers instantly. So I had to semi-overprotect the top 2 lanes by placing a couple extra Phat Beet, but then out of nowhere, all my Phat Beet got frozen and the bottom lane lawnmower was also taken by weasels, forcing me to be very cautious on planting some more Phat Beet to break the ice. But thankfully that was the last of the weasels, so we actually ended up beating day 26 on our first try. Day 27, and I know I mentioned this I think in every single challenge I do, but it's my favorite level of Frostbite Caves because there's no windstorms, so I can just spam as many plants as I want. But it actually ended up being surprisingly a little more challenging than I thought because I was spamming Phat Beet as fast as I could, as you can tell from my son, but they actually consistently kept on getting taken out. So even though you'd expect me to have a lot of defenses down by the end, the defenses were pretty minimal. But of course, with the help of the Rutabaga, we're still able to beat day 27. Day 28, I prepped a couple columns of Phat Beet. And these definitely were not optimal placements, but I felt like it'd still work. And it did work for the most part, but I did have to replace 3 of them. But that was all of Frostbite Caves, beat with just Phat Beet. Next up, Lost City in its entirety ends up being pretty simple for Phat Beet because it provides us with the gold tile sun. And for that reason, I'm super speeding over it because it's very easy to beat. There would normally be some threats, of course, like the shovel zombie or the umbrella zombie, but the Phat Beet has no problem in defeating those guys, so they aren't very much of a threat. And that was all of Lost City. Next up, Far Future, very similarly to Lost City, is a very easy level without many threats. And the main reason for this is the addition of the power tiles, who make any difficult level very easy. There are of course some problems in Far Future, like the very tanky mech zombies, but with enough Phat Beet, those aren't very much of a problem either. And that was all of Far Future, beat with just a max level Phat Beet. Next up, Night 1 of Dark Ages starts, and of course, we always try to see how far we can get with Phat Beet without the need of Gold Bloom. So my first placement is between those 2 sun graves to get the early sun, and then slowly planting more and more Phat Beets to get more and more sun from the sun graves. And these defenses were enough to defend against this insane horde of coneheads. Day 2 starts with a pretty strategic placement of where I place a Phat Beet right next to a sun grave, but it's also in a place where it can defend against zombies pretty well. And this actually ends up working out because 2 more sun graves end up spawning right next to it. And honestly, I thought I could just beat this level with just these 2 Phat Beet, but the top one ended up getting killed by the 2 bucket heads because of course we've mentioned earlier that 2 bucket heads will take out a Phat Beet. But with that problem aside, night 2 was pretty easily beat without the need of a gold bloom. Night 3 is always a level where we have to start using the gold bloom because if the plant costs more than 50 sun, we can only place 1 of it since there's no sun gravestones in this entire level. So of course, with the help of a gold bloom, we got down some Phat Beet and beat night 3. Night 5 has 2 flags, and I start by placing 2 Phat Beet in these upfront tiles, and then later adding 4 more Phat Beet, 1 in front and 1 behind the ones that were already placed. And night 5 also introduces the Jester zombie, who is very easily taken care of by the Phat Beet because they don't have any projectiles. And with the very unnecessary 4th Phat Beet in each lane, the final wave was made trivial and would beat night 5. Night 6, defenses were prepped. And I chose to go with the placement that would cover the whole map because I knew some zombies would spawn from the gravestones in the very back. And I did end up losing this Phat Beet in the front in the bottom middle lane because of the 2 bucket heads. And for some reason, I just chose to not replace it this time, allowing the remaining Phat Beet to handle the rest of the level. In the end, beating night 6 as well. Night 7 has 2 flags, and I tried copying the placements of the previous level, but somehow misjudged the placements, so the column in the very back was actually not being hit. But of course, this is a very minor problem, so it didn't really affect anything. But there was one pretty interesting thing, which was the knights, and I found out that 1 knight is able to take out 1 whole Phat Beet by itself, and this could become a very big problem in the future levels where the king is introduced. Day 9 thankfully doesn't introduce the king yet, and only introduces the potions which speed and health boost the zombies. And of course, these potions can be a problem if a tanky zombie like a buckethead or a knight happen to get them, so for preventative measures I chose to plant 2 Phat Beet right next to each other in the front lanes just in case a tanky zombie were to come in. And using this method, we breeze past night 9. Night 11, there's 2 flags and there is that gravestone in the back we have to worry about, so I quickly got rid of it using a Phat Beet. And then the wizard was introduced in the very top lane, who instantly sheepified the Phat Beet that was doing damage to it, so I placed another Phat Beet to take it out. And in doing so, I realized that if we place the Phat Beet in the very front lane, the wizards basically become useless because they're instantly destroyed right as they walk in or are about to sheepify one of my Phat Beet. And as you can see, the final wave sent in a lot of wizards, but none of my Phat Beet got goatified, allowing us to easily beat night 11. Night 12, we have to protect these puff shrooms in the back and constantly plant food them so they don't fade away. And this is a semi-scary task, so I spammed Phat Beet in the very front to take care of the wizards and jesters and any other tanky zombies, and then 4 Phat Beet in the back for any that spawn through the gravestones. And thankfully, it's normally just imps spawning from the gravestones in the back, so night 12 was also beat very easily. Night 15, I prepped some defenses. And I basically used the same placements that I did in the previous level because they seemed to work pretty well. And of course, as the final wave came in, they seemed to do their job perfectly, allowing us to defeat Night 15 in a very simple manner. Night 16 has 2 flags, and this time I chose to do the method where the Phat Beets cover the entirety of the map. And this was kind of a problem in the bottom middle lane because a wizard instantly sheepified that Phat Beet, so I had to place another one right in front of it. And as things got hectic, I used a plant food to get rid of the kings. And the final wave threw in 3 kings, but not a lot of zombies that the kings could make into knights. So after beating the kings, there was only this one knight left who took out one of my Phat Beet, and a couple seconds later I replaced it, and teaming up with the one behind it, they're able to take down the knight, defeating Night 16. Night 17's a pretty easy level because it provides us with a surplus amount of sun. And I get down a decent amount of Phat Beet, but don't really feel the need to overkill, so I just save my sun for whenever I need it. And as the final wave was sent in, bringing forth the Gargantuar, there still wasn't any need to overkill as those 3 Phat Beet were able to take care of business, defeating Night 17. And here it was, the last night of the Dark Ages. I of course quickly start by planting a Phat Beet right in front of the magnet shroom just for the extra protection, and then whenever I had enough sun, I would just spam more Phat Beet just for damage. There were a couple imps that spawned through the back gravestone, so I had to place down 2 Phat Beet in the back to take care of them as well. But aside from that, this level was dealt with pretty easily. Even these last Gargantuars weren't too difficult, allowing us to defeat all of Dark Ages with just max level Phat Beet. Next up, here we were, the birthplace of Phat Beet. Allegedly, of course, because I didn't do any research on it. And it's also the world where it usually gets made fun of. But let's see how it does when it's at max level. Day 1 was taken down very easily. Days 2 and 4 followed. Day 5 were tasked to protect these 2 walnuts as well as these 2 Phat Beets. But an important thing to remember here is that the endangered Phat Beets are also at max level. And we're able to take down day 5 with only 1 column of Phat Beet. But here's the type of level that this world gets truly interesting in. And that is the conveyor level. Because most of the conveyors of Neon Mixtape Tour include Phat Beet, so we're technically forced to play them. But the problem is that the conveyor, for some reason, is very reluctant in giving us the Phat Beet, so this mower in the bottom lane was taken. And I made a heavy misplacement with the second Phat Beet that I got because I was afraid that this first Phat Beet was about to be taken out. This completely left the bottom 2 lanes open to attack, especially that bottom lane, since it had no mower. But thankfully, we got a third Phat Beet very quickly, allowing us to protect ourselves. And then a fourth Phat Beet came in very fast as well. And honestly, these 4 were enough to beat this entire level, but we still kept on getting a couple more. So we placed down a 5th and 6th Phat Beet as kind of overkill, thankfully beating day 6 on our first attempt, but it gets much worse later on. Day 7 and 8 were extremely simple compared to day 6. Day 12, however, introduces a problem, the microphone whipper, who is sometimes able to kill my Phat Beet instantly. But then alongside the microphone whipper came another problem, the Gargantuar of the Neon Mixtape Tour. And this Gargantuar in particular is a problem because its high health allows to take out the Phat Beets in the very front, and if we place the Phat Beet too far back, it uses this long range attack to take it out. But thankfully, day 12 was beat easily. Day 13, I prepped some defenses. And at first, I'd chosen to go with these 2 columns very up front, but then I quickly realized that I'd forgotten about the Gargantuars and the imps that they throw. So I added 2 more Phat Beet in the back to take care of them. And there's another thing I realized within this level. If I have 2 or more Phat Beet hitting a microphone whipper as it's coming in, they will take out the microphone whipper. Well, most of the time that is, because for some reason, the very top Phat Beet got taken out by a microphone whipper. But that's a very rare occurrence. This other top Phat Beet got taken out, but that was because there was only 1 Phat Beet hitting that certain microphone microphone whipper. But aside from that, day 13 was taken down. Day 15, again, we have to protect 5 Phat Beet. But again, they're all max level, so this isn't actually much of a challenge, allowing me to easily protect them. And then came day 16, another conveyor level. But we got very lucky in the beginning with 2 back-to-back Phat Beet, and it felt like an instant victory because no way we'd get a better start than that. But there was one major problem with this level, and that was the fact that there's no lawnmowers. And you can see here, when I plant food a Phat Beet, it instantly kills the gargantuars. And this is a very important piece of intel because this gargantuar in the bottom lane, I didn't have a plant food for it, so it ends up throwing its imp and I can't do anything about it. And this was the first level that I actually ended up losing in. On my second attempt, I got 2 Phat Beet back to back again. So it made me think that they might just be hard coded in and it wasn't really a luck thing. But this time I was very wary of the plant food against the gargantuars. And it started looking a little dire in the very bottom lane, but I got a Phat Beet at the perfect time, which allowed me to take care of those front leading zombies. And you might have noticed that my coins went down by 1,000, and that was because I bought a plant food for this attempt. If you remember from the first attempt, I was 1 plant food off from beating the level because of that one gargantuar, and so I didn't want to make the same exact mistake. So I used 1 for this gargantuar and then patiently waited for this last gargantuar, placing my last Phat Beet and using a plant food on it, beating day 16 on my second attempt. Days 17 and 18 were easily beaten. 19 again was a conveyor level, but thankfully this time we had lawnmowers on our side. And thank goodness that we had the lawnmowers because we literally only got 2 Phat Beet in the entire level until the level snuck in another one at the very last moment. Days 20, 21, 23, 24, 25, 28, 29, and 30 were all very easily beaten. But then came in easily the worst level of this entire challenge, the boss of Neon Mixtape Tour. Remember when I said that the conveyor levels were a problem? This was the specific level that I was talking about. On my first attempt, I saw 1 Phat Beet that instantly got a speaker thrown on it, and afterwards not a single one showed up, allowing the zombies to easily breach my house. The second attempt started off very similarly. It gave me 1 Phat Beet that instantly got speakered, and I got the second Phat Beet only after the Mohawk had already made it all the way. Third attempt started off a little better, giving me 1 Phat Beet and thankfully a second one shortly after. And I spam bought plant food because I thought this was the attempt, as somehow I got a third one. And you might be asking, why did I spam buy plant food? And that was the main problem with the Phat Beet. Because of the speakers in that very front lane, they can't reach it unless they do their critical attack or they use the plant food attack. Oh, an even bigger problem, and maybe the most annoying thing of this entire challenge, you can't use a plant food to protect them from the speakers dropping. Even if you use a plant food, the speakers still take them out. And as you just saw, all 3 of my Phat Beet got instantly taken out by the speakers. And then I got another Phat Beet who was also taken out by a speaker and I couldn't do anything about it. But thankfully I'd gotten a 5th one to take out the zombies that were approaching the lane without a lawnmower. But then we had no luck getting a 6th one for the very bottom lane, which meant that the microphone whipper and the cone head very easily made it all the way to the house. And honestly, after the 3rd attempt, I'd completely given up hope because as soon as I got a Phat Beet, the boss would drop a speaker on it, and I can't do anything about the speakers, which basically in my mind was starting to mean that this level was impossible. Was the Phat Beet truly this atrocious that it can't beat its homeland boss by itself at max level? But then I started to notice something a little different about this attempt, and that was the fact that these Phat Beet in the middle survived for a very long time, meaning that the speakers weren't directly being thrown on them for some reason. One actually did get launched by the other speaker attack. That's not too bad because that was just my miscalculation, and I got a second one to replace it. And I was planting and shoveling the other plants as fast as I could to try and get more Phat Beets as fast as I could as well. And by this point, believe it or not, the level had been going on for 3 minutes straight, and I'd only taken out 1 of the 5 bars of the boss's health. So I knew that this was going to be a battle of attrition. And again, it was starting to look bad because these rainbow roller skaters had taken out my Phat Beet completely. But I realized if I placed a Phat Beet in that very middle lane, I could use it to plant food it and take out any zombies that were coming in. And even though I'd burned through a lot of my coins, I still had 16,000 to work with, which basically meant 16 more plant food that I could buy. It got a little close in the very bottom lane, but I plant fooded that Phat Beet at the right time to take out those rainbow skaters. And it kind of took me a long time to realize that the boss's second health bar was mainly just sending the rainbow skaters. And my main reason that I kept losing all my Phat Beets was I was placing them very up front, which allowed the skaters to take them out instantly. So after I found this out, I quickly started to place my Phat Beets kind of farther back and practically just focused on placing them in the middle lane because this allowed me to use a plant food on them whenever to take out any zombie on the map. And I'm very much skimming over this level because by this this point, this attempt had been 7 minutes in, but thankfully I was getting very lucky with the speakers that were being dropped and they weren't taking out my Phat Beet. You can see that I built up a pretty hefty amount of Phat Beet. And even though these first 2/3 of its health took about 7.5 minutes, this last chunk of the boss's health only took about a minute. And this was mainly due to the reason that I'd realized that I was basically about to win, so I started spam buying more plant food and using them as soon as I could to quickly take the boss down. And with this one last plant food, we had finally taken down the boss of the Neon Mixtape Tour. And next up, the Jurassic Marsh, although it can be annoying because of its dinosaurs, it actually isn't very much of a threat to the Phat Beet. And this is mainly due to the reason that the Phat Beet's area damage allows it to take out most of the zombies before the dinosaurs can even aid them in any way. That's the main reason why I'm super speeding through the Jurassic Marsh, so we can get to the more interesting worlds of Big Wave Beach and Modern Day. Of course, there won't be a level as challenging as the Neon Mixtape Tour boss, but there are still some pretty interesting ones. And that was all of the Jurassic Marsh. Next up, Big Wave Beach, always a very boring start because of the very slow-paced zombies that walk down the water. And so days 1, 2, 4, 6, 7, 9, 11, 12, 17, and finally 19 were very easily conquered. Day 20 was also a pretty easy one, even though all the tiles are covered in water. But I just wanted to show you the main interaction between Octozombie and the Phat Beet. The Octozombie will throw its octopus on a plant, but then the Phat Beet's area damage actually just makes it basically impossible for the Octozombie to overwhelm them, because if one gets covered, the other ones around it will instantly just get it out. And it's kind of just this repetitive cycle of being trapped but then instantly getting out of the Octozombies. And that aside, day 20 was easily beat. 22 was also a simple level. 23 is an interesting one because we have endangered plants, but we also have fishermen that can easily fish hook them, so we have to be pretty careful. But thankfully, when there's a very big horde of zombies, we can just use plant food on a Phat Beet and it basically clears the entire map, making it very simple for us to keep track of all the fishermen. And with the simple use of that strategy, we beat day 23. Day 25 normally is a tough level because we have to defeat 10 zombies within 5 seconds. But again, because of its very wide-ranged plant food attack, we're easily able to complete that challenge and beat day 25. Day 27 seems a little concerning at first because we're only given 5 lily pad to work with. But of course, when we eventually end up using a plant food on the Phat Beet, the lily pads also multiply, and this helps us beat day 27. Day 28, the challenge is that we can't lose more than 5 plants, and we beat it by only losing 2. Day 29 was also a simple level, and here it was, day 30, the final level that we play of Big Wave Beach, and also the scariest one. And of course, it's mainly because the plants we have to protect are guacodiles, and there's also fishermen. And if the fishermen even happen to touch the guacodiles use their lawnmower-like ability, and it counts as them dying. And that is the biggest threat that we have in this level. There's a couple moments it got pretty close, like in this bottom lane when my last Phat Beet got hooked by a fisherman, and then we only had that guacodile and a lily pad left. But I quickly planted a Phat Beet on the lily pad to prevent this from happening. And again, this bottom lane got pretty scary because this gargantuar took out my Phat Beet and my only lily pad that were in that lane and threw an imp right at my guacodile. But I quickly got a Phat Beet down, taking down this level. Next up, Modern Day, much like Big Wave Beach, was very simple up until basically the last level. So I'm going to be super speeding all the way there. Modern Day is only really difficult if there's a zombie that hard counters one of the max level plants. Like for example, the pea shooter had the shovel and jester zombies, and the cabbage pole had the umbrella zombie. But of course, Phat Beet is able to hit every zombie in the game, allowing it to easily breeze through all of Modern Day. And here it was, maybe the only difficult level in Modern Day, day 30. But even this level is made simple with the Phat Beet's area damage. The only sketchy zombie is the all-star, who happens to take one Phat Beet with it every time. But some preventative measures are using a plant food on a Phat Beet right as the all-star is about to hit, and it cancels out its hit. And at the same time, it destroys a lot of the zombies that are already in the map. And of course, for the gargantuars as well, one plant food is enough to beat them. And here, I could have bought a plant food to take out this bottom guard, but instead I just chose to use a lawnmower, and we beat day 30. And that's basically all of Modern Day, as level 31 is very easy. And with that, although we made fun of the Phat Beet in previous videos, it ends up joining the No Loss Club. Let me know in the comments who I should try next. Okay, bye bye.